They took everything from me. My name, my business, my reputation, the woman I planned to marry. They did it slowly, carefully, and with a smile on their face the whole time. And when it was done, when I was standing in a rented room with nothing but a laptop and a box of old papers, they thought I was finished. They were wrong. What I did next took 4 years of complete silence, one carefully placed phone call, and a single envelope. And they never, not once, saw it coming. Before I tell you this story, I want you to understand something. I am not telling it because I am angry. I am not telling it to get sympathy. I am telling it because if you have ever had someone look you in the eye, call you a brother, and then spend 2 years quietly digging your grave, you need to hear how this ends. Stay with me until the end of this video, because what I did is not something most people have the patience for. Most people, when they get hurt like this, they react. They call people, they make noise, they go to lawyers right away. And that reaction, that very human, very understandable reaction, is exactly what the people who betray you are counting on. I did none of that. And that patience, that stillness, that 4 years of silence, that was the weapon. That was the whole thing. So stay, because this story ends somewhere most people never get to. I want to take you back to where this started, not to the betrayal, but to before it. Because you need to understand what was at stake. You need to understand what I had built before you can understand what it felt like to watch it disappear. I grew up with very little. My father was a seasonal farm laborer. We moved a lot. I watched my mother count money at the kitchen table more times than I can remember, not counting what she had, but figuring out what she could skip. I knew from a young age that the only way out of that life was to build something with my own hands. By the time I was 28 years old, I had done exactly that. I had a regional grain export business, real infrastructure, warehouses, refrigerated transport, active supplier contracts with farmers across 3 provinces, and a government-issued export license that took me 4 years of paperwork and relationship building to obtain. That license was my golden ticket. Without it, nothing moves. Without it, the whole operation is just a building full of grain going nowhere. I was not rich, but I was solid. I had 12 years of work sitting in the walls of those warehouses, 12 years of early mornings and skipped vacations and phone calls at 2 in the morning when a shipment had a problem. I was proud of it, not in an arrogant way, in the way that a man is proud of something he made with his own hands and nobody gave him. And then I met the partner. His name is not important to this story. What matters is who he was to me. He came through a mutual contact at an industry conference. Smart man, well-dressed, knew how to talk to people. He understood banking, financial instruments, letters of credit, things that I had always handled roughly, things I had always done myself without ever fully mastering. He filled a gap that I genuinely had, and I was grateful for that. I brought him in, gave him 30% equity, voluntarily, without being asked, because I believed that when you find someone good, you keep them properly. We signed the papers, he moved into the office, and for the first year, things were genuinely good. The business grew, he handled the banking relationships, I handled the operations. It worked. My fiancée, I will call her only her in this story, because she deserves her privacy. She met him early on. And I remember, maybe 3 months in, she said something to me that I brushed off completely. She said, "He never looks at things the way you do. When you look at the business, I can see that you love it. When he looks at it, he's calculating something." I told her she was imagining it. I told her she didn't understand business partnerships. I wish I had listened to that one sentence. What I did not know, what I had no way of knowing at the time, was that for 18 months, the partner had been running a quiet, methodical operation underneath mine. He had been filing false financial statements to our bank, redirecting supplier payments through a shell account he controlled, and, most critically, he had cultivated a friendship with a senior official in the regional government office that issued and renewed export licenses. That friendship cost money. I found out exactly how much, but at the time, I knew nothing. I was running the business, I was trusting him with the numbers.
The day it collapsed, I remember it clearly. It was a Tuesday, mid-morning. I was at the main warehouse doing a routine stock count when 2 government vehicles pulled into the yard. 4 inspectors got out. No warning, no prior notice. They had paperwork, an emergency suspension of our export license pending a fraud investigation. The company name on the fraud complaint, mine. The forged signatures on the financial documents, mine. The bank records showing misappropriated funds, my account number. I stood in that yard holding a clipboard and the ground just went out from under me. Not dramatically, just quietly. The way the ground goes out when something is actually impossible and your brain cannot immediately process it. I tried to call the partner, straight to voicemail. I tried again. I drove to the office, he wasn't there. His desk was cleared. Not completely, not obviously, just enough. Just the things that mattered to him were gone. I found out within 48 hours that he had already started a new company. Different name, different registration city, same industry contacts, my contacts, the ones I had spent a decade building. And then came the second part, the part that hurt worse than the business. Over the months leading up to this, the partner had been spending time with my fiancée. Not in any obvious way, he was careful, but he had been quietly feeding her a story, pieces of a fictional life he had invented for me, a second set of accounts I was hiding, trips I had supposedly taken that I had no record of. He gave her screenshots. I found out later that those screenshots were fabricated, professionally done, convincing. She believed them. She had no reason not to. This was her partner's business partner, someone she had dinner with, someone who seemed honest. She left. She didn't say much, just that she couldn't be with someone she didn't trust. I tried to explain, but when someone has been fed a story for long enough, your explanation just sounds like more of the story. I understood that later. In that moment, it just destroyed me. I was publicly named in the fraud investigation. Suppliers who had worked with me for a decade stopped returning calls. Friends went quiet, not hostile, just quiet, which in some ways is worse. I lost the warehouse when the bank froze the accounts. I was left with a rented room in a city that suddenly felt like it belonged to someone else. A laptop, 1 box of documents from a storage unit I had rented years ago, just out of habit. Old contracts, original supplier agreements, physical bank records from the early days that nobody had ever asked for and I had never thrown away. I sat in that room for 3 days. I didn't call anyone. I didn't eat much. I just sat. And somewhere in the middle of the 3rd night, a thought came to me. Not hot, not angry, just clear and cold like water. I kept everything. Every receipt, every original contract, every email I had ever printed, every bank transfer confirmation from the beginning. He forged my signature on documents, but I had the originals those documents were meant to replace. And somewhere in that box, I had the first version of every agreement we had ever signed. He didn't know I kept any of that. Why would he? Nobody keeps paper records anymore. Who prints emails? Who stores physical bank confirmations from 6 years ago in a storage unit? I did, out of a habit my father had. He always said, never throw away a piece of paper with a number on it. I thought it was old-fashioned. That night, alone in that room, I understood that it was wisdom. I closed the box, put it back carefully, and I went to sleep for the first time in 3 days. I want to explain to you what the next 4 years actually looked like, because in stories like this, the revenge part always sounds clean and fast. It wasn't. It was slow. It was boring. It was lonely, and it required something that almost broke me more than the betrayal did. It required me to do nothing visible for a very long time. I found a logistics consulting job in a different city. Nothing glamorous, helping mid-sized trading companies sort out their shipping documentation. Small salary, small apartment. I told no one from my old life where I was.
No social media, no LinkedIn update. I simply disappeared from the world I had lived in. The first year, I used every spare hour to go through my documents. Everything in that box, I organized, cross-referenced, and scanned. I built a clean digital archive, encrypted, backed up in 3 places. I matched dates. I tracked which original contracts were contradicted by the documents the partner had filed. I found 11 specific instances where his filings directly contradicted documents I could prove were original. I was not building a legal case yet. I was building a map. I needed to understand exactly what he had done before I could figure out what to do about it. The second year, I started looking outwards instead of inwards. I found out that the government official who had received bribes, the one who had revoked my license, had since been promoted. He was now in a more senior position in a different department. The partner, meanwhile, was running his new agricultural company with visible confidence. He had taken my original supplier relationships and was operating in the same regional market under a new name. He was doing well. From the outside, it looked like a clean, growing business.
But I had learned to read things more carefully by then. And what I noticed, buried in a regional trade publication I had started monitoring, was a line about a major international grain purchasing firm that was in the process of renewing long-term supply contracts with regional exporters in our area. It was a quiet line. Most people would skip it. I read it 4 times. The third year was about connecting those 2 pieces. I hired a private records researcher, not a lawyer, not yet, because a lawyer meant noise and I was not ready for noise. Just someone who knew how to read corporate filings and trace contract relationships. What they found confirmed what I had suspected. The partner's company had applied for and been tentatively awarded a significant international supply contract. The contract required a government compliance certificate, signed off by the very same official who had helped destroy my license 3 years earlier. This was not a coincidence. This was a system. They had built a system together, and now that system was about to pay them both very well. And that was when I understood exactly where to push. The 4th year was about patience and precision. I did not rush. I spent months confirming every detail. I tracked the contract renewal timeline. I identified the name of the compliance director at the International Buying Company, a large European agricultural import firm. Through a former supplier of mine, a man who had stayed quietly loyal even through everything, I was able to verify that this compliance director was real, that the company had a formal due diligence process for new major suppliers, and that physical documentation sent to their office would be reviewed. In early spring of that 4th year, I prepared the envelope. 14 pages, printed cleanly, organized in order, certified copies of original contracts showing my actual signature compared to the forged ones. Bank transfer records from the original fraud period, the timeline of the license revocation mapped against the official's communications, a 1-page cover letter, not emotional, not demanding, just factual, stating who I was, what had happened, and what the documents showed. No threats, no requests, just, here is information your due diligence process should have. I sealed it. I wrote the address by hand. I walked to a post office 2 cities away, and I mailed it. Then I went home, made tea, and waited. The first sign came 6 weeks later. The partner's company went quiet. Social media, trade directory listings, everything. Nothing dramatic, just a sudden stillness that anyone watching would have noticed. What I learned through channels later, and eventually through public records when the story became impossible to keep quiet, was this. The European Buying Company had received my envelope. Their compliance team had taken it seriously enough to engage their own legal department. That department contacted an independent audit firm to review the partner's supply chain and financial history before finalizing the contract. That audit found everything. Not because I told them where to look. My 14 pages gave them enough of a thread to pull on their own. The audit uncovered the original fraud, the shell account, the pattern of forged documents, the supplier payment diversions. Everything I had mapped in my first year, they now had with the weight of an international firm's legal team behind it. The contract was canceled, and the audit findings were referred to a national commercial crimes unit. Then the second collapse happened, the one that I had not fully planned but had understood was possible. The commercial crimes referral included enough information about the government official that a separate anti-corruption body opened its own inquiry. Within 3 months, the official was suspended from his position pending investigation. The same man who had revoked my license, who had taken money to help dismantle 12 years of my life, was now sitting at home waiting for investigators to knock on his door. The partner tried to reach me, through old contacts, through the mutual acquaintance who had first introduced us, through a text message to a number I no longer used. I never responded, not once. There was nothing to say. He was not trying to apologize, he was trying to understand what had happened, trying to trace the origin of it back to me. I gave him nothing, not even the dignity of acknowledgement. My fiancée found out the truth through the investigation documents, some of which became accessible in public commercial records. She did not contact me for a long time, and when she eventually did, I was polite, kind even, but I did not reopen that door. That part of my life had already closed. Some losses you grieve, and then you carry them quietly for the rest of your life. You don't try to undo them. The original fraud charges against me, the ones filed under my name with my forged signature that had cost me my license and my reputation, were formally dropped. The business registry was updated. My name was cleared in the official records. There was no ceremony, no announcement, just a letter from a government office, 2 paragraphs, informing me that the case had been resolved in my favor and that all prior notations against my name had been removed. I was sitting at the small table in my apartment when I read it. I made a cup of coffee, I sat back down, I looked out the window for a long time. That was it. That was the whole thing. I want to be honest with you about what those 4 years actually cost, because this is not a story about how revenge is sweet. It is a story about how justice is slow and how most people do not have the patience for slow. I was lonely for most of those 4 years. I had built myself back quietly in a city where nobody knew me, with a job that was far below what I had once built. I watched the partner live well for 3 of those 4 years while I said nothing. I watched him take clients I had built relationships with for a decade and use them like they were always his. I watched a corrupt official get a promotion, and I said nothing, and I did nothing visible, and I kept organizing my documents and making my tea and going to work every morning. That is not glamorous. That is not the version of this story that feels good to watch in a movie, but that is the version that worked. The thing I want you to take from this, the only thing that matters, is this. I did not destroy him. I didn't need to. I just made sure that the truth was in the right room at the right time. That's all. Just the right information to the right people at the moment when it would do the most damage to the structure he had built on top of my name. The truth was always there. I just waited until someone with power actually needed to hear it. People who build their success on fraud always reach for something bigger than they can hold. Always. Because that's the nature of people who take shortcuts. They never stop. They keep going. They keep needing more. And the bigger they reach, the more people are watching. You just have to be patient enough to be one of those people. If someone is doing to you what was done to me, document everything. Every email, every contract, every number. Keep it somewhere safe and say nothing about it. Rebuild yourself quietly. Do not make noise. Do not threaten. Do not announce yourself. Just watch and wait and keep building your case until the moment finds you. And the moment will find you. Because the people who betray others are always moving, always climbing, always grabbing, and eventually they climb into a room where the wrong person is watching. You just have to still be standing when that happens.
If this story hits something real in you, hit that like button and leave a comment. Tell me, have you ever had to rebuild from zero after someone who should have protected you burned everything down instead? I want to know. And if you want more stories like this, the kind that never make the headlines but should, the ones that are too quiet and too real for the news, subscribe, because I have more of these, and every single one of them is true.